The alien woman walked through the ruins of her planet with the sort of grace that made falling rubble seem like a personal affront. Her long ears twitched every time a stray wind shifted the floating shards of crystal overhead, a gesture that would have been elegant if not for the way she constantly bumped into malfunctioning security drones, which seemed to scuttle like panicked cockroaches. Really, she muttered to a drone dangling upside down by its magnetized feet, this is the part of the universe where I find dignity? The drone beeped helplessly as if agreeing, and she smirked, flicking her ears at it. She had always believed that humor was a kind of armor, even when you were abandoned by everyone who mattered. She stepped over a puddle of iridescent liquid that shimmered like molten rainbow and nearly slipped, catching herself just in time. Gravity, you're drunk again, she said, because in her experience, a planet's gravitational field with a mind of its own deserved commentary. The sky above was streaked with iridescent clouds and floating crystal spires that refracted the light in chaotic patterns, making it almost impossible to tell where the horizon began. It should have been awe-inspiring, but today it just felt like a cosmic joke. The universe seemed to be laughing at her. Her people had left her here, in the abandoned core of what had once been the pinnacle of their civilization, and now she wandered among echoes and half-collapsed towers, muttering sarcastic insults at broken consoles and holographic archives that refused to activate. When she finally reached the central data hub, she paused and let her long fingers dance over the touch-sensitive panels, which flickered in response but never fully engaged. Ah yes, the technology of my people designed to teach humility and patience simultaneously, she said. The panel emitted a tiny shock as if it had been waiting to remind her of her forsaken status, and she yelped, more from surprise than pain. She shook her head, smirking, I can die dramatically later, not now, too early in the day. That's when she noticed it. A transmission bouncing through the galactic comm channels, weak and garbled but unmistakably human. Her ears twitched in interest. Humans had a reputation for chaos and improbability, and yet somehow in their messiness there was a kind of clarity that her people lacked. The message sputtered on, a mangled jumble of greetings, technical jargon, and what sounded like someone attempting humor and failing spectacularly. She laughed aloud, a sound that echoed oddly among the ruins. Well, if the universe insists on a punchline, here it is. She read and reread the signal, trying to piece together intention from the chaotic syntax. Somewhere across vast light years, a human was reaching out, and she felt a strange, unexpected warmth in the pit of her chest. Maybe he could be different, maybe he could be something. She packed her essentials, a suit designed to adapt to gravity variations, a multi-tool she often used as a hairpin when she got bored, and a small container of nutrient gel she had no intention of sharing with anyone else. She paused, catching herself mid-motion, and muttered, seriously, if anyone from my species finds out I'm attempting contact with a human, I'm doomed. Or worse, mildly disapproved. Both are equally terrifying. Her ears flicked nervously, but there was determination behind her eyes, the kind that drove her forward despite abandonment, ridicule, and the occasional malfunctioning robot trying to trip her. Her journey began aboard a modest starcraft, nothing impressive by her people's standards, but plenty fast enough to dodge bureaucratic patrols and avoid collisions with asteroid fields shaped like cosmic donuts. She navigated through solar storms with a kind of giddy recklessness, tossing quips to herself about how much she hated the concept of safe piloting. Ah yes, the thrill of nearly vaporizing my own eyebrows, excellent for morale, she said as she veered around a particularly temperamental plasma cloud. The ship's AI beeped a warning which she ignored, rolling her eyes. She had a flair for dramatics when alone, a kind of self-entertainment that often bordered on theatrical absurdity. Planets passed below her like painted marbles, some with skies of liquid color and winds that smelled faintly of electricity and burnt sugar. She landed briefly on a moon where gravity shifted unpredictably every 3 minutes, tumbling herself into a crater in a fashion she later described in her personal log as graceful, if unintentional. A local life form, a small gelatinous creature that seemed offended by her presence, bounced on her shoulder, and she responded with mock indignation. Really, this is how I meet allies, with judgmental slimeballs. She laughed, the sound oddly musical in the thin air of the moon. Even in these small, ridiculous moments, she felt her hope flicker brighter. Perhaps the universe was cruel, but it also had a sense of humor worth following. Weeks passed, or was it days? The concept of time felt flexible in the void of space, warped by her constant travel and occasional sleep in gravity-simulated chambers that never quite mimicked home. Each day brought minor calamities that would have been fatal if she took them seriously. Rogue cargo drones attacking her ship because they believed it was lost merchandise, meteor showers that looked suspiciously like confetti, and occasional bursts of interstellar radiation that made her hair stand on end. Every incident she met with a joke. "Oh good, the universe sent glitter, how thoughtful." Finally, she reached the outskirts of human-controlled space. Her long ears twitched nervously, betraying the tension she tried to mask with humor. She remembered all the warnings she had received about humans, their unpredictability, their tendency to overcomplicate simple tasks, and their inexplicable obsession with shiny things. She smiled at the irony. Here she was, an abandoned exile, counting on a species famous for chaos to be the source of her last chance. Her ears twitched as she whispered, "Well, at least if this goes terribly wrong, I can blame it on interstellar miscommunication." As she approached the human settlement, the first thing she noticed was the noise. The clatter of machinery, the shouts of workers, the hum of engines. Then she noticed the humans themselves, bumbling and busy, waving hands as if that could control gravity, spilling drinks that defied logic, and laughing at things that might or might not be funny. She hid a laugh behind her hand, marveling at their odd, chaotic charm. She reminded herself to remain cautious, yet the spark of anticipation in her chest burned brighter than it had in weeks. This was her chance, her gamble, her absurd, impossible hope. And somehow, despite the long ears, the abandoned past, and the endless cosmic jokes, she felt ready to meet it head-on. Her ship touched down clumsily on a platform coated in reflective panels, the thrusters throwing sparks that would have mortified a human pilot. She stepped out, ears twitching with both anxiety and amusement, prepared to confront the unknown. Somewhere in the crowd, a human noticed her, and she raised a hand in greeting, practicing charm she hoped was universal. He squinted, his expression somewhere between confusion and curiosity, and she thought, not for the first time, that humans might be the most interesting creatures in the galaxy. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she allowed herself a genuine smile, imagining that maybe, just maybe, her last chance hadn't abandoned her after all. The alien woman stepped off her ship onto the human settlement's landing platform, her long ears twitching with a mix of excitement and disbelief. The humans around her were chaos incarnate, stumbling over cables, bumping into each other, and gesturing wildly at screens that seemed to ignore them entirely. She tilted her head, ears flicking like radar dishes trying to pick up meaning, and muttered to herself, "If these are the beings I'm supposed to trust, this is either brilliant or catastrophic." A human near the edge of the platform tripped on a maintenance hatch, flailing so dramatically she almost applauded. "Welcome to the species of potential disaster," she said under her breath, earning a beep of what she assumed was her ship's AI signaling agreement. Her first encounter with a human was predictably awkward. He had messy brown hair, eyes that seemed far too focused on irrelevant details, and an expression of simultaneous curiosity and confusion. He approached, raising one hand in what she guessed was a greeting. Hi," he said, clearly unsure of the protocol for addressing someone with long, mobile ears and a glowing navigation chip embedded in their wrist. She raised her own hand, tilting her head. "Greetings. Are you the one sending garbled messages across the galaxy, or is this a costume convention?" He blinked. "I think you're real." "Yes," she said dryly, "and no, I'm not here to judge your choice of headgear, though frankly it's impressive how gravity-resistant your hair is." She allowed herself a small smirk when he coughed awkwardly, scratching the back of his neck. The human's name, she quickly learned, was Eli, and though he lacked experience with interstellar diplomacy, he possessed a certain reckless charm that made her ears twitch in amusement. He insisted on showing her the settlement, which from her perspective was a mixture of ingenious engineering and comedic failure. Gravity-shifting elevators that launched passengers too far, cargo bots that collided more often than they delivered, and a cafe that seemed to be run by a sarcastic AI named Mocha, which frequently commented on the humans' lack of coordination. She laughed quietly when Mocha announced, "Warning, your latte will arrive hot enough to burn you if it ever arrives at all," as the barista spilled a steaming drink across the counter. Eli winced but shrugged. "They're improving," he said. The alien woman tilted her head. "Improvement is relative, I see." Humor became their bridge, the lens through which they could navigate misunderstandings. Every minor mishap, a bot dropping a container of neon fluid gravity tiles that flickered unexpectedly, even Eli tripping over nothing, was met with shared laughter, an acknowledgement that chaos could be entertaining when survival was not immediately threatened. Despite the humor, a shadow lingered. Her people's abandonment haunted her, a quiet gnawing that occasionally made her twitch involuntarily. She tried to mask it with sarcasm. "Yes, human, your species is fascinatingly inconsistent," she said once, flicking her ears dramatically. "And if I survive long enough here, I might even get a manual on your sense of decorum." Eli laughed nervously, unsure whether this was a joke, an insult, or both. She didn't clarify. Ambiguity was a valuable tool. Their routine, if it could be called that, was interrupted by a sudden storm, a localized anomaly caused by a misfiring gravity reactor nearby. Platforms tilted, crates slid like marbles, and gravity shifted in unpredictable pulses. She grabbed Eli's arm mid-fall, both of them sliding across the platform like ragdolls, and muttered, "If we survive this, I will personally recommend you for interstellar heroism. Or at least a certificate of chaotic competence." Eli laughed, more out of instinct than confidence. Thank you," he managed as a cargo bot skidded past, narrowly missing their heads. Once the storm passed, they found themselves laughing at the absurdity of survival. She realized that humor was not just armor but a compass, guiding her through interactions she had feared would be impossible. It was in this way that trust began to form, not as a sudden revelation, but as a quiet accumulation of shared experiences, jokes, and minor disasters navigated together. Eli began to open up about his life. A human born on a mining colony, fascinated by star charts and improbable anomalies, always chasing the next puzzle. She teased him relentlessly about his obsession with mapping stars, calling him constellation nerd extraordinaire, and he responded with mock indignation, a grin spreading across his face that made her ears twitch with amusement. One evening, as they repaired a collapsed platform caused by yet another gravity flux, she caught him staring at her in a way that made her ears flick nervously. She raised an eyebrow. "Yes, human. Did I do something remarkable, or is it just the lighting?" He flushed. I just didn't expect to meet someone like you." She tilted her head, ears twitching thoughtfully. "Like me, interesting. Please elaborate before I assume flattery or insult." They laughed, and she felt the odd warmth of connection settle between them, something unfamiliar yet comforting. Their bonding was punctuated by small, absurd adventures. They navigated a planet whose surface constantly reshaped itself due to magnetic shifts, forcing them to leap from floating fragments of rock while exchanging jokes about their acrobatic incompetence. They encountered a sentient vending machine that demanded poetry in exchange for supplies, which she recited sarcastically in the style of her abandoned people, much to Eli's amusement. They discovered a minor black hole disguised as a nightclub, and she quipped that humans certainly knew how to pick vacation destinations. Each episode, while potentially dangerous, became a ritual of levity, a reminder that even in a vast, indifferent galaxy, laughter could exist. Yet she could not ignore the lingering threat. Remnants of her own species had detected her presence. She noticed the faint pulse of a tracker embedded in one of her old devices, and her ears twitched with unease. She did not mention it to Eli immediately, choosing instead to practice a don't panic face that involved raising one brow and flicking her ears. When the trackers finally made their presence known, their ship was more bureaucratic than threatening. An inspector drone with a clipped tone demanded her return, citing protocol violations and existential inconvenience. She laughed outright. "Protocol violations? I'm off-world, unclaimed, and apparently entertaining to a human. That's my life summary?" Eli raised an eyebrow. "You make this sound like a vacation." She winked. "In a galaxy of mistakes, why not enjoy the view?" Their encounter ended with a chase that was more chaotic than strategic. They darted through gravity tunnels, dodged automated defense turrets, and accidentally activated a holographic parade, which left the pursuing drones confused and trailing behind a chorus of synthetic fanfare. At one point, Eli tripped spectacularly, rolling under a hovering cart of neon fruit. She extended a hand, only to have him pull it into a chaotic, exaggerated tumble. When they finally regained control, she collapsed in laughter, long ears twitching as she gasped, "Truly human, your coordination is exceptional." Eli groaned but smiled, a rare, unself-conscious expression. By the end of their misadventures, a fragile trust had formed. She had begun to rely on this human's unpredictable but earnest instincts, and he, in turn, was discovering courage he didn't know he possessed. They sat on a platform overlooking the glittering lights of the settlement, bruised, battered, and laughing at the ridiculousness of surviving another day. She flicked her ears, glancing at Eli. "Perhaps I misjudged humans. Perhaps there is more hope than I anticipated." He smiled, scratching the back of his neck. "And perhaps you're the most insane person I've ever met, in a good way." As stars stretched across the sky in shimmering arcs, she felt the first true flicker of belonging. Humor, disaster, and courage intertwined, weaving a bond neither could deny. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, absurd, and incomprehensible, but for the first time in her life, the alien woman realized she wasn't entirely alone. Somewhere beyond the settlement, her people's trackers pulsed faintly, waiting to see her fate, but she no longer feared them as much. With Eli by her side, every improbable event became another reason to laugh, to survive, and to hope. And hope, she thought as her ears twitched with a sly grin, was exactly what she intended to chase. The alien woman and Eli had been traveling together for weeks through sectors of space where the rules seemed written in ink that constantly smudged. Each day brought improbable anomalies and minor catastrophes that somehow bordered on absurd comedy. Gravity wells that yawned like sleepy cats, rogue asteroid fields that hummed catchy tunes, and starships with AI systems that developed what could only be described as existential crises. She had begun to rely on Eli in ways she hadn't anticipated. Not because he was particularly skilled, though he occasionally surprised her, but because his presence had a way of turning even the most perilous circumstances into something manageable, something they could laugh at together. And humor, she realized, was now inseparable from courage. Their current mission or misadventure, depending on perspective, had brought them to a derelict sector at the edge of known space. Sensors were picking up the faint signature of her people's tracking fleet, a squadron of sleek, angular ships that had a way of appearing both terrifying and bureaucratic at once. She had tried to explain this to Eli, but every attempt became a mixture of sarcasm and warning. "If they capture me, I may be subjected to the most tedious procedure in recorded history." A lecture on interstellar decorum, which honestly is worse than combat. Eli had nodded, his face a mixture of amusement and worry. "Got it. Lecture over laser fight," noted. The fleet appeared suddenly, materializing from a subspace corridor like a fleet of polished knives. Their leader was an imposing figure, eyes narrow, robes fluttering unnaturally in zero gravity, and a voice that could be classified as both judgmental and slightly offended. "You have violated every protocol known to your species," the leader said, gesturing dramatically at the alien woman. "Return immediately or face consequences." She tilted her head, ears flicking in exasperation. "Consequences? Are we talking eternal exile or a strongly worded memo?" Eli stifled a laugh behind his hand. I think they mean serious stuff," he whispered. She ignored him because sarcasm was easier than panic, and proceeded to outline her plan aloud, not for the leader but for herself. "Step 1, confuse them. Step 2, escape. Step 3, deliver biting commentary if cornered. Optional, look fabulous." The first step went according to plan, though with comedic deviation. She activated a camouflage field meant for stealth, but it misfired, rendering her visible only to Eli and one confused maintenance bot that promptly fainted. The fleet's sensors scrambled, alarms blared, and in the ensuing chaos, she and Eli darted into an abandoned trading hub. Gravity tunnels twisted beneath their feet, forcing them to hop, slide, and occasionally tumble through low corridors. Eli tripped over every conceivable object, pipes, crates, and a particularly judgmental-looking statue, but she found herself laughing so hard that her long ears nearly hit the ceiling. At one point, she accidentally activated a holographic festival display, causing a parade of luminescent dragons, marching bands, and confetti to erupt around them. The pursuing fleet paused, utterly bewildered by the sudden spectacle. Truly, she said, panting and holding her ears down to avoid snagging on a dragon, my people do appreciate pageantry. It is their one redeeming feature. Eli groaned but could not hide his grin. You make interstellar evasion look festive, he said. They navigated the labyrinthine hub, encountering sentient doors that demanded riddles, gravity lifts that shifted unpredictably, and an AI custodian that insisted on reciting safety protocols in iambic pentameter. Each challenge, potentially fatal in other hands, became another absurd moment to share. She guided Eli through the chaos, both relying on his human intuition, which often contradicted logic but occasionally worked miraculously, and her own alien ingenuity, which sometimes bordered on theatrical. By the time they reached the central docking bay, both were bruised, battered, and laughing at the ridiculousness of survival. The confrontation with her people became inevitable. The leader of the fleet cornered her, voice sharp, eyes like daggers. She stood tall, long ears twitching in mock salute. Yes, I know I am an inconvenience, she said. But consider this, your protocols may be impeccable, yet I am here, alive, happy, and in excellent form. I dare say protocol may need adjustment. The leader's lips twitched. Was it surprise? Amusement? Hard to tell. She continued, I have crossed the galaxy, survived the chaos of humans, and even tolerated their peculiarities. I have found courage, humor, and a sense of choice you never offered me, and I will not return merely because your rules demand it. Eli stepped beside her, fidgeting with a control panel that seemed to have no function other than to make him feel involved. And she's right, he said, voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. She chose to survive, to help me survive too, and I think that counts for something. The leader paused, then sighed, a sound that was equal parts exasperation and reluctant respect. Perhaps autonomy has its merits, the leader said. The fleet retreated, leaving behind nothing but a few confused drones and one flustered clerk who had been tasked with filing interstellar violation reports. For the first time in what felt like forever, the alien woman allowed herself to relax. She turned to Eli, ears flicking with amusement. Congratulations, human, you survived my people, my sarcasm, and interstellar bureaucracy. Not a bad record, Eli laughed, brushing dust off his jacket. Not bad at all, though I think we both need a vacation. They left the derelict sector behind, navigating through star systems that seemed calmer now, though still unpredictably chaotic. Humor became their shared language, a way to mark survival, growth, and companionship. They laughed at gravity wells that yawned, at stars that blinked like mischievous eyes, and at each other's clumsy heroics. Through the absurdity, the alien woman recognized her own transformation. She was no longer solely defined by abandonment. She had learned trust, courage, and the surprising depth of connection across species. Her ears, once twitching nervously at the thought of rejection, now flicked with curiosity, amusement, and confidence. Eli, in turn, had changed. He had discovered bravery he didn't know existed, learned to navigate chaos without panicking entirely, and developed a respect for a species he had barely imagined. Together, they had become a partnership forged not by circumstance alone, but by laughter, risk, and empathy. As they charted a course for the next system, the alien woman looked out at the stars, twinkling in patterns that seemed almost deliberately whimsical. You know, she said softly, the universe is vast, dangerous, absurd, and incomprehensible, and yet it feels a little smaller now. Eli glanced at her, smiled, and said, smaller maybe, but funnier too. She flicked her ears in agreement. Somewhere across the galaxy, her people might still have opinions, regulations, and judgment, but she no longer needed their approval. She had found belonging, not in conformity, but in choice, courage, and the